Questions?
I had a couple questions about the use of mantra,
Okay.
with or without mala beads. So you've mentioned a few times in videos the use of mantra, but you said that it's a varied practice used for different purposes. There's energizing mantras, there's relaxing mantras,
Mm-hmm.
mantras for other purposes,
There are Catholic prayers.
Catholic prayers. So my question
We
is
used to,
about
when I was a kid, I remember, when I was a young kid, I remember the priest would give me penance, and I would be saying these prayers over and over and over, you know. It does funny things to a kid to have to say one prayer over, you know, over and over as a punishment. It's just kind of strange, kind of fun, weird. Okay, go ahead. I shouldn't have said weird.
well,
It felt weird for a young boy.
hmm, I've never had that experience, but my question was about the different functions of mantras that you said they had. So some you said were energizing.
Yes.
Do you mean what do you mean by that? Like people use them for the purpose of what? Giving themselves more energy,
Yeah, so
or
if you just listen to like Om Tada Tutore Tre Soha, 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 Om Tada Tutore, that's energizing. You could feel it. But people use mantras for all kinds of things. I remember, I probably shouldn't say this, but I remember being with a Tibetan Lama from Tibet, and he would say mantras to get parking spaces. And it worked. And in Boston, that's a big deal to get a parking spot back then. So, I don't, so you can use mantras in any way you want, pretty much. But they're an easy way, easier for many people. It was for me at one point in my life when I was doing combined practices to use mantra as a way to settle the mind, to calm the mind, to harmonize the mind, to and it's also kind of like a devotional thing. In the Nundro, what was prescribed was 100,000 of several different mantras, some of them quite long, but also some of them short. And this was done in conjunction with meditation and with mandala practice. And it's just part of a way of devoting your time, your life, your hours of the day. And you can do them while you're doing a bunch of other stuff too. So you just and it sets up a rhythm in your brain. And one of the interesting things while we're on this topic is that the brain seems to only be able to think one thought at a time or feel one pain at a time, pretty much. And you can use that to your advantage, I found. So if your mind is filled either with the attention to the breath, or with a mantra, nothing else can get in there because it's full already. And so, but your question was about energy. Does that
yeah,
answer it? Kind of. Yeah, it's subjective. You have to try it. You have to try it out for yourself.
so that
Gate,
yeah. So
gate,
all right, well
paragate,
that
parasom, gate, bodhi, soha, gate, paragate, parasom, gate, bodhi, so. And you could chant these too, and you can change you can move them up and down in the chest. So some are higher up in the chest, tada tutore tre soha, right? And some are lower, gate, paragate, parasom, gate. And so you can use that too. And so these are just tools, instruments. Now, they can mean much more if you go into the meaning of them, like Om Mani Padme Hum, the famous one, Om Mani Padme Hum. They have different meanings. And in the case of the mantra, say for Tara, which is what the Om Tara Tuture Ture Soha is, that mantra was also tied to my primary tutelary when I was younger. And so it works together. And you kind of drive all efforts into one, right? And then you wake up.
right. So then, so I've done a mantra for quieting the mind down. It was one of those silent mantras, and
Oh,
it did work.
a silent mantra?
So I learned it uh, you do it quieter, and then eventually you're not supposed to ever say it out loud again, and you just do it in your meditation sessions.
Oh, is this one of these secret mantras?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I mean, that's pretty something. That's something.
Right. So whatever it
Who
is.
Who was the one that giving those out? Just
the Transcendental Meditation.
okay, good. I think they helped quite a few people, although they did it in a very interesting way, I gotta say. But go ahead.
Yeah, putting whatever the rest of it aside, the whole.
All right, well, let's do that. Let's draw the curtain of charity over the details.
Yeah, it did work from the perspective that it did quiet my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can say that much for trying out mantra, but I'm curious about the other functions that it's put toward. You say it all goes into the same thing, but why would you want an energizing mantra like the first one you said?
Well, you're meditating, you're falling asleep. You know,
okay.
Or you're becoming, you know, as the Zen folks, the meditation experts say, or whatever, you know, you're falling into oblivion. You know, so you're not calm. You're half asleep. You're not. Your mind is not fresh and crisp. So you could use it for that. You could use it for devotion, and that can be energizing at times. Again, you know, all rivers flow to the sea, but there's thousands of millions of different rivers, and everyone. The difference between this approach and other approaches is that there's not a one size fits all. The world has changed a lot since then, and now we have access to all of this information and all these tools from around the world. And since the goal is the same, regardless of the tradition, they all flow to the same sea. If one is intelligent about it and doesn't get lost in it, then one route is to find your own path to a degree, to waking up anyway, to get that far on your own, and then we can talk about, you know, what's after that. But it's up to the individual to experiment themselves and find what works for them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. This isn't like Zen, where the Zen master, you know, can hit you with a stick when you're going off astray or whatever. It's not like a Christian tradition where you really have to read the Holy Scripture, or the Hindu tradition, which basically, or the Advaita Vedanta, where you're kind of subscribing to a worldview, or guru yoga, where you're using devotion to your guru, as in what do they call it, bhakti yoga. It's actually closer to a more comprehensive program of human development. Because just because you've woken up doesn't mean you're not going to have problems in life, right?
Yep.
And living, and so to live wisely is an art. And there were people who came before us who can help us with all of this, regardless of how modern our world has become. And it's become actually even more important now, because things looks like they're falling apart to some extent, or the AI is coming down. And so we're going to need to know what we're about as that's happening. I'm sorry. Let's go back to your question.
No, that helps. My other point off of that, or other question off of that would be, where does someone learn these mantras authentically to then experiment or try them to see if they work for somebody in the way that they're intended? Like an energizing mantra. I don't know any, and I don't know where I would go to find an quote energizing mantra. Well,
I'll be happy to help where I can, but I think, you know, if we just think about it, it would make sense. If you want a Christian prayer, you should go to the Christians, right? If you want a Tibetan mala or Sanskrit mala, you can go to the Tibetans, or you can go to the Hindu, you know, variations of Hindu or whatever. Uh, and then if you want to make, I mean, I was given some that were developed for me at different stages of my development by my teacher. You know, some worked better than others, and so I should say my teachers, and so it's like everything else. It's a organic process, and I don't want to like say, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should go to this person for this item and this person for that item. That doesn't make any sense in this work. By the way, humanity's been doing this since time began, as far as we know. And so, you know, people get confused because they think of Sufis, for example, as a Muslim sect of mystics. No, that's not true. It existed long before the Islam. And I think Rumi may have actually said that it goes back to, you know, the time of Adam, which is, I think, another way of saying a long, long time, right?
Right.
So there's nothing new about this enterprise. What's happened is in the West we've lost it. We threw it out with the Enlightenment. We got rid of superstition, and we became more scientific, and we became more, you know, outcome driven, whatever that means. And you can see what happens when a culture gets lopsided like we have. It's the results are not pretty. So we need a balance between reason and rationality and understanding, you know, of depth. And we do not live just on our right side with our left brain. Man is a fascinating creature in that we have another aspect to us altogether. And if we only develop one side or the other, we're going to get in trouble, which we have. Thank you for letting me do my little advertisement for balanced human development. Okay.
I have I tried from one of our last videos. I tried that imaginative exercise of thinking of pylons coming out of the bottom of my feet into the ground for a while, and I was impressed at the result. So I
yeah, absolutely. The power of the second attention. Good.
Yes. So you said that it was you feel much more stable walking around like that. So I tried it after that call, and then for I don't know how long it's been, 2 weeks maybe.
Why don't you describe it for the audience? Why don't you describe what it is and why you used it?
Sure. As you're, well, this one particularly caught my attention because I ride the subway to work and back, which is a very rickety experience.
Battery 100%.
Puts you off your balance. And this exercise is basically imagining that the bone structure of your leg comes out through the bottom of your feet as like a pylon into the ground, 3 feet into the ground. And for anyone who doesn't know what a pylon is,
1 or 2 or 3 feet, depending on your taste. Go ahead, yeah.
Connected
and for anyone who doesn't know what a pylon is, it's like those big cable structures that are out to like help cables run electricity. I think is that what it is?
No, it's kind of the post that you put in the ground to like hold the concrete that's going to hold the concrete column in place. Is the way I visualize it. It's the way I visualize it. Give me one.
The huge structures.
Okay.
Either way, it's like a structure that would come out the bottom.
Ready to connect.
I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. A little technical difficulty here.
Connected to David's iPad.
All right, here we go. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Right. So however you visualize it, these pylons come out the bottom of your feet and go into the ground. 1, 2, 3 feet, however you like it. And so I noticed when I did this over the course of a few days, my balance was a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And that I was a lot more, I guess, sure-footed is the word I would use.
It's an old martial arts device. It's used by martial artists.
Yeah.
And wrestlers should try it too. I think wrestlers should try it because you really get planted onto the mat. Or judo.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so I was also able to, I don't know, hold myself up on the subway a lot better without relying on the railings, which was a gentle surprise. So I was wondering, Uh, so that got me, this is what I wanted to ask. That got me thinking, like, what else I might be able to do with second attention. So I went to work and I forgot to bring a jacket, and it was quite cold outside, and I was meeting somebody for lunch. I had to walk. It was windy. And so outside I got cold, and then I imagined like a fire in my belly to heat up my body almost. And
Careful with that one. Okay, go ahead.
But it like kind of worked. Like I felt, I guess, a little warmer, but I couldn't tell if that was just because my attention was on this as opposed to on how cold I felt, I guess. So my question was, what other things I might profitably try
Ready to connect.
aside from the pylons thing? Or if I just experiment with anything, really.
I wouldn't experiment with anything really necessarily. I mean, you can get lost that way. I mean, there's plenty to use that's already been tested and we know works. You can get lost in the second attention quite easily. So be careful a bit. Just be reasonable. One thing that I found useful early on, or I don't know, midway, something like that, was when I saw a bird like on a wire on a tree, my vision would go through the feathers, through the skin, through the muscle and bone into the heart of the bird, and then I would visualize the blood swirling in the heart of that bird, and then from there it's a fairly straight step into the infinitude.
Ready to connect.
But so going to the heart of the matter and visualizing the swirling of the heart, the blood in the heart of a bird, or a creature that you feel connected to.
Okay.
It's or another human being. It's good to do that. There was something we did way back in the day where we'd acknowledge the inner aspect of the other person, where you can empower that with a visualization in the second attention. Right? Unless that sounds too weird.
No, that sounds, I just think I could approach it in multiple ways. And did you think about like the biology there, the tissue, and going into it all down to the heart?
No, not the biology is not important. The main thing is that you're going from the outside manifest world into the inner world of the chambers of a heart.
Ready to connect.
And in that chamber of the heart, this thing's getting annoying. In the chamber of the heart, you're down to like a single blood cell, and in that blood cell there's a molecule, and it just goes to infinity. It's like a little gate to infinity, to the Nagual. Mm-hmm. To the expansiveness, the huge expansiveness of, and also it's a reminder of the complete and total relativity of reality, as Einstein showed, right? So what we consider big may be very, very small, or it could be very, very large. It all depends on how you contemplate it. What we consider fast could be very, very fast, or it could be very, very slow, depending on how you think about it. Like the thought of a tree is very, very slow, but our thought, we could say, is fast. But our thought compared to the AI is going to be like the thought of a tree. It's going to be painfully slow for the AI. And so we have to get used to this relativity of everything, because the AI is going to think and work at rates that are much, much faster than what we're used to. It'll be to us like we are to houseplants with regard to the speed of our thought. And the same thing with size. It's very, very good for people to set aside some time, even 20 minutes, and just contemplate the relativity of size in this cosmos. Most people haven't even thought about the immensity in which we're embedded. Right? But it's good to do that because it gives you perspective. So first you look out as far as you can go. Just spend 20 minutes doing that one day. And then spend the same amount of time, but this time start going smaller. Go down to the Planck length. through the molecules, through the atoms, through the subatomic particles, through the space or whatever, to the Planck length. And then that's very good for the human brain. We need to stretch it and use it. And so in both directions, it's very good, and it's something that's part of any serious Dharma student's work. And I suppose that's the other thing about this way, is that you have to learn stuff. You can't just adopt beliefs or ideas or ideologies. You got to learn. And so that's what this is about. Does that make sense?
I have a couple. It does, but I have a couple follow-up questions, which
Okay.
is one, like going out.
The Planck length, by the way, let me explain. Many people may not know what the Planck length is. The Planck length is I think, one of the smallest scientifically conceptual spaces. It has to do with the limits of the frequency of light or something like that. It's very small.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead.
So if I'm thinking, if I take this 20 minutes to go, to quote, go out as far as I can, then the farthest I've gone out in my own, like, seeing of the world is probably in an airplane. And then aside from that, it's videos I've seen, movies I've seen of what the Earth looks like from the moon and what deep space might look like. So if I run through this, which I have to some extent, like, it feels like I'm just playing over things I've seen in my
Right. That's not near. That's not even. That's like going out one hair, and you have 1,000 miles or 10,000 miles to go. So even our galaxy is so that gives me an idea. There's a video I know that's helpful with this, and if I can find it, it shows basically the scale of Earth relative to the universe, and that's, I hate to short circuit people's use of their minds and realizing how their minds are have much more potential than people give it credit for. And this is a big Sufi point, and it's demonstrated by some of the the Mahayana Buddhists as well, although I don't know that they emphasize it in the same way. And that is, the human mind and the human brain has much more potential than we're giving it. So I'll try to remember to look for a video that shows the relative scale of the Earth in our universe, and that's just the visible universe. And it's a lot further than what you think, and also further down too, into the minute, the submicroscopic. So okay, good. Yeah, no, you just got started, because you got to leave this solar system and leave this galaxy, and then take a look. You'll be surprised. Most people are
surprised, like. Well, because if I try to imagine it, then it just becomes like everything I reduce into spheres. Like when I'm reading the flower ornament scripture and these huge numbers are given, I think of it like a trillion. That's a difficult number, at least for me right now, to wrap my head around.
Correct.
Or a quintillion.
Hence the contemplations, and they're fun too. I mean, at first they're not, because you think, oh my God, it's going to be work. But it's not work. It's just using your second attention. And you can just go, let's see this. So what immediately comes to mind, so here's another use of mantra. It's completely free association, but gate, paragate, parasamgante. I think that translates as beyond, 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 beyond that beyond, to to something else, right? So be it, or something like that. But that mantra is about going beyond. At the time I used it, I thought it was going beyond in terms of your, going into a higher level of consciousness, beyond the thought of beyond. But now I realize it also works spatially. So you just keep doing that. You just go. So you go out as far as, say, you hear a plane going by. You go, instead of staying at that plane, you go out to the moon. Instead of the moon, you go out to the limits of our solar system, where Pluto used to be as a planet. And then from there, you go to the galaxy. And then from there, you go into the number of galaxies or something like that. And you just keep going. You just push. It's easy. It's easy. But you have to believe you can do it. And that's a critical aspect of our modern life. We've forgotten what we're capable of doing. But you can't do anything unless you believe you can do it. And so I recommend just doing that. And once you've done it, especially if you've got the flower ornament behind you, or even if you don't, then you don't have to do it again. Now your substrate remembers, right? And it's always there. And so when they say the sky like nature of mind, they mean big sky, right? And big mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
And there's many things like this low-hanging fruit that's all over the place. It's low-hanging, but it's delicious fruit, and it's very, very high yield, extremely high yield. And if you don't really want to do that, then you can just pick up the Avatamsaka Sutra. Let me grab it here. This book right here. And this book will do it to you. It'll expand your mind for you. And it was designed as a psychoactive text. And it works. And that was written in the 2nd century by Saruman Sufis in somewhere around the Hindu Kush. So, Buddhism also is a lot wider than people imagine.
A quick aside on that, I got to a point in the scripture where I read about eating food.
Actually, I think it was in the Bhutanese cultural sphere, now that I think. But you get my drift. People have been doing this for a long time. We've just forgotten them. We've forgotten the work that they did, and we've taken it for granted, and we think that we know, but we don't. They have gone through a lot of what we're going through now, many times over. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, that actually relates to what I was about to ask, is that I read this part of the scripture where they're talking about eating food and dedicating it to all of the microorganisms that make up your body.
Good.
And I was interested because they had an understanding of that in the 2nd century, apparently.
They had aseptic. They knew about sepsis. They knew about antiseptics. They had birth control of a sort. They used some kind of wood in a primitive IUD. There's a lot of things that we've just. We're a culture that is in love with itself, or we were a culture that was in love with itself. Now, so typical. Instead of loving ourselves, we hated ourselves. I'm speaking generically as a culture.
Yeah.
Both things are ridiculous, folks. There's no need for love or hate here. Why don't we just look dispassionately at where we are, the mistakes we've made, the things that need to be corrected, and rather than filling the whole place, stinking the place up with hatred and lies, just an honest assessment of individually and collectively. It's not going to kill us. As a matter of fact, it may save us. But this notion that we're going to teach the AI to deceive us so we're better, that is actually dangerous. So we got to be careful that we don't make the AIs racist, right? Racist against whomever. But we seem to be doing the exact opposite right now. All right, let's get back on Dharma.
Same thing, visualization spatially in the flower ornament scripture. There's phraseology like for as millions of eons as the number of atoms and.
Why don't you read? Give me something, and I'll read it, or you can read it. Let's give people a flavor of it.
Sure. Where did I just get? To go back a little bit.
Here we go. This is the 10 stages. I just opened it up. Among the 10 transcendent ways, transcendent wisdom is paramount in these enlightening beings. But they also practice others as best they can. This is a brief summary of the 6th stage of enlightening beings, called the stage of presence. Most of the enlightened beings, in which are masters of emanation, expert and powerful in stopping people's conceit, skilled in drawing people away from the conditions of pride and arrogance. They cannot be distracted by the interrogation of all listeners. They are skilled in introducing beings into interdependent origination. Whatever actions they undertake, whether by giving or kind speech, or by beneficial action, or by cooperation, all of it is never apart from thoughts of the Buddha, the teaching, the community. Enlightening beings, the practice of enlightening beings, the transcendent ways, the stages, the powers, expertise, and unique qualities of Buddhas, including omniscience, complete in all respects. Why? To become the best of beings, unexcelled leaders and guides, and ultimately omniscient refuges. So this is a relatively dry segment, right? But you could see how, but here, right here, just this statement here. Never apart from thoughts of Buddha. So that practice right there, just the idea that you're going to be conscious all day. And this is what the Sufis call remembrance. And this is a way of living life as a prayer. Like if you have Christ in your mind all day long, it never leaves you. And so then you get closer, much closer to Jesus that way, because it's always there. And people need to understand that they can do this. It can be done. Because a lot of times people don't even know what they can do. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I have a separate question for that.
Okay, question.
I, like many others, I'm sure, get distracted in my contemplations or meditation. And
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that, well, it's fairly obvious, but like I'll quiet myself down a little bit, and then I'll start contemplating something like interdependent origination or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
The other day was gravity. That took me for a loop. But my mind will go off on a tangent, or some work concern that really isn't a concern that needs to be dealt with will pop into my head, something else. And I bounce around, ping pong around, and then I come back to the original contemplation. And then after 30 seconds, I fall off again. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Okay, so before we go too far, let me just talk about remedies for that. In the beginning, all you need to do is just gently notice that you've lost the train of thought, or you've been distracted. The train of thought's the wrong word. And you just notice it, and you bring your mind gently back. You must not get in a war with yourself. You can't wash blood with blood. If you just get into a war with yourself, you're just creating more thought. So you just notice it and you return. No big deal. This is why the counting the breaths, by the way, is so valuable, because in that exercise, you're lucky if you make it to 3, honestly, right? So in the first stage, all you do is you notice it and you bring your mind back. In the next stage, what you would do is you would just look at the distraction, just like any other thought, or just like any other object in the sky, or in the sky-like nature of mind. So you're meditating. The word willow pops to mind. So you just look at the word willow. Maybe the image willow, or maybe so you notice. Maybe you notice some anxiety rising up in your chest, or wherever you might feel it. Or maybe you notice some tension in your neck. Again, you just notice what is, and you don't go to war with what is. Right? So those are 2 very good step stages. And if one's not working, then move to the other one. Okay? And remember, there are times when nothing can be done. There are times when some things can be done, and there are times when everything can be done. And pay attention to that. Like Miguel Ruiz says, always do your best. That's a great way to live your life. You'll just have a better life if you always do your best. But it's understood that at some times your best will not be, it's not going to always be peak performance because the conditions aren't ideal. And so rather than get into a war with that, you go, oh, well, these conditions aren't real. Maybe I shouldn't do this while I'm too hungry. Or maybe I shouldn't do this so late at night. Or maybe I shouldn't do this when I've got, a to-do list of 40 things and I owe like 5 phone calls or whatever. Do you see what I'm saying? So again, this is where intent comes in, and the intent of a warrior. So you always do your best, but you also do your best at understanding that conditions determine what's possible at a given point. This is a very important point, by the way. Right, in life in general. And that's the other thing, is that the development, the spiritual development of a human being was not a specialty item up until recently. This is what all thinking women and men did. Of course, but we've lost it. We've lost our minds collectively. And now some people can't wait to turn it over to an AI, and they'll go, it'll save us, right? No, it's not going to save us from ourselves. Okay? Sorry. Follow up?
No, that was what I was looking for.
Okay.
Here. It's the Sufi contention, and you've said this as well, that things like the Nasrudin stories or other tales are meant to be ingested, digested, but the full digestion of them doesn't really come out until experience. And that can come through an experience, like any daily experience in your life, whatever reflects it.
Correct. It's basically a description of your own mind.
Right. So what I'm wondering is,
in joke form, so it can get past the ego defenses. Right? That's what these are. These teaching stories, these teaching instruments that have been selected and tuned for the Western mind are to get past the defenses of the ego, which only things like humor and art can, or poetry, things like that can usually. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, so I and many others live a life where you're running through many of the similar experiences, quite routine. So I go to my work, do like work from whatever to whatever, and then come home and then do my studies where I'm reading those kinds of tales and other stuff, make dinner, go to bed, that sort of thing. And I'm wondering can your daily life have a dearth of the experiences necessary to bring out certain teachings? Or does anybody's daily life?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, let me give you an example from yesterday. I was looking around for morsels of nourishment or good information, and I wandered into a discussion of among contemporary archaeologists who were saying that they knew that there was no ancient civilizations because they had looked in all the places where there was there were little fragments of tools that had been made that they had found. And when asked, well, why didn't they look at some other place that would be obvious kind of geologically or in terms of the history of the terrain there, they argued that no, that their approach was right, that they should definitely focus on these places that are just off the coast of places that we know. To make a long story short, what was very, very clear was they were Nasrudin. Do you remember the story of Nasrudin and the streetlight?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell it to the audience, or shall I?
Yeah, give me 3 seconds to make sure I put it in the right order.
Nasrudin's at a bar. Okay, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You do it.
Nasrudin's at a bar, and he leaves, and some fellow bar hopper follows him out, and he notices Nasrudin's on the ground underneath a street lamp, crawling around on his hands and knees. And he says, "Mullah, what are you doing?" And he says, "I'm looking for my keys." And the stranger, I mean the fellow bar friend, says, "Well, where did you leave them?" And he said, "Well, I probably dropped them off over there somewhere. I probably dropped them over there somewhere." He says, "Well, why are you looking here?" He says, and Mullah says, "Because there's more light here, right?" And so the archaeologists are doing precisely that cognitive error, right? Which is where, and in science this happens all the time. We look where it's easiest to look instead of where it might be the most fruitful, right? That, by the way, is a universal tale. That's not just Mullah. That's all over the place now.
Yeah, that one's pretty common. That's a common joke. Okay, I see.
Yeah, so it's really everywhere. It's really everywhere. It's a matter of being conversant enough with your own mind and its workings, and then you see these patterns that are these templates, and they pop into view.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the incredible, the exploits of the incredible Nasrudin. What is it? What are some other titles?
I think it's pleasantries.
The pleasantries of the incomparable Mullah Nasrudin. These are Sufi joke books that we can link to them down in the bottom. And if people have questions, they could be happy to. I'll be happy to try and answer them. Okay.
Well, I have a follow-up question. That Nasrudin tale, for example, that you just told, it's contended that the Nasrudin tales have many dimensions and flavors which become apparent to the Sufi almost at the same time. Whereas, like, when a lot of us hear that tale, myself included, the one single apparent teaching becomes available, but not necessarily the rest. Like the obvious logical working of the brain that becomes apparent. But I'm sure there's other flavors to it that don't, just from hearing.
There's different levels of understanding. So the usual thing, and I know this from having gone through this situation, is that you laugh at the guy. What an idiot, right? And then when you grow up a little bit more, you notice other people doing this, smart people. And then when you grow up a little more, you realize, oh my God, that's what I do. And then when you realize that's what you do, and the situations in which you do it and how you do it, then you're starting to unlock more of its potential. But this is a very simple one, this Nasrudin one.
Mm-hmm.
The others are more, just hilarious, fun. The one about the donkey. Well, there are a bunch of them about the donkey.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do a reading sometime of some of those, just to give people the flavor for that, how that you can use humor to teach deep spiritual things. Everything spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
In the world of the evolved man or woman. Okay, let's go. Next.
Yeah, next question. Many incredible works of art and architecture have been made and dedicated to God or Buddha or Allah. Mm-hmm. And I was watching a Hawkins lecture a long time ago. He started tearing up when discussing some poor builder working on a chapel or something like that, and he was working on one brick or 1 square meter of it for years, mm-hmm. and that was like a devotion practice. So I'd like to hear more about the relation between great art, sculpture, architecture, and the way.
Well, in Christianity, certainly, I think it's pretty evident that our greatest, and if we circumscribe it to Europe and maybe Russia and that cultural sphere in the United States, etc., most of our great art has been religious, including music, Bach, and painters, Michelangelo, and so on and so forth. But then we had a movement away from that. We'll get back to it. So art that speaks to something greater than the artist has been always a tradition. Art itself can be that for folks. So I'm not quite sure what you're trying to get to. Where I went to was the fact that these Buddhist sculptures, these gorgeous Banyan Buddhist sculptures, were all destroyed by the Afghanis. I mean, by the Muslims, proving the Buddha right once again, right, that nothing lasts, right. And so I'm not sure exactly. And in Islam, you do not make graven images of Allah, and they have a much more evolved, sophisticated aesthetic around that.
So
go ahead.
Well, no, you say whatever. Complete the thought.
Well, you mentioned God, Buddha, and Allah. Those are synonyms. With God, I think you're referring to the beautiful cathedrals and the paintings, and I would add to that the music of Bach and others. With Buddha, the whole point with Buddha is that nothing's permanent. Everything will be destroyed, not in a morbid way, but in a factual way. And so a lot of the most beautiful and magnificent Buddhist sculptures were destroyed. And in Islam, there are no images that I know of Muhammad or Allah. It's more refined.
So for Islam, I was thinking of what is the word for that? It's almost like what's the Mandelbrot set? That stuff that's like
fractals.
Yeah, that kind of.
Yeah, it's a lot more sophisticated than that. There are books about numbers, and this man's relationship to numbers goes way, way back, way before the Greeks. And I happen to be looking at some of that, and it's amazing. Who was the guy's name? Before Parmenides, who was it? Well, Pythagoras, for example. Pythagoras was a full-blown mystic. I mean, that's what the guy was. The math was just a side effect. So Sufis go back a long, long way. Pythagoras, you would probably say he was a Sufi, using a broader, lens. He certainly had the characteristics of it. I don't know the details, so I probably shouldn't say anything. But I guess what I think it's important for people to know is there's always been this current in humanity. Now, there's sometimes when it can do it, where it can flower openly, and other times when it has to shut down. And we may be headed to a time when it's going to be shut down, like China's in right now. Or has been, like China's in right now, I think. So, you got to make hay while the sun is up.
So let me point my question more directly about great.
Okay, go ahead. Question.
I see you on X or otherwise speak about in videos like great works of art, quote, great works of art. Mm-hmm. And knowing that all roads lead to the sea, I imagine that your opinion of that art is somewhat connected to the way, or what it can say.
It precedes the way, but the way, I mean, the way, whatever you want to call it, it precedes all that. It precedes waking up, but waking up does nothing more than just increases the appreciation.
Right. So my question about that is what makes, well, this is a big question, but you share some art that initially when I look at it, I don't think, or I would definitely not think if I approached it on my own.
Which art was it?
Great art.
Which art?
You shared, so modern art type things with not like a human subject.
There's some modern art that will blow you away, but you have to understand the history of art to understand how it works. It's like a language, sort of, but it can be extremely nourishing, and so yeah, you have to be. It's like music. Like some people, they hear jazz and it sets their teeth on edge. Or they hear Philip Glass and they go, that's the most boring thing I ever heard. He's just repeating the same thing over and over with slight variations. But if you know music, then it's very different. And art's the same way. Right? It's a cultivated capacity. But I'm curious now, which piece in particular, I wonder? What did it look like? Never mind. It's not important for the general public. So suffice it to say, art is nourishment for man. Art speaks to the soul if it's true art. And in participating in art, one nourishes a deeper part of oneself. And I think to live life without that would be hideous indeed. And that happens too in history. You know, they just wipe out the art. That happened in Germany and in Russia and in China. Ugh. Don't let it happen here, for God's sake. We need art. But go ahead, what's the question now?
Well, so like if I look at Velasquez or Sargent or something like that, I like going to the museum and looking at some of them, but usually I can tell an incredible level of craftsmanship, years and years of effort and detail, and they bring out like a qualities of I don't know how to describe it. Like you can feel that this person is charitable or something like that effect, rather than just the paint on the screen. But if I look at like Rothko or some of this modern art,
again, if I don't know if you studied the history of art, but let's just use you as an example for teaching purposes. You sound exactly like someone about Van Gogh, right? In the 1900s, 1910s, 1920s. Well, wait a minute. What was he? Okay, so no. What I mean to say is that the art historians did not appreciate Van Gogh until the last 30 years, 40 years. Really appreciate him. I mean, some people did, but the guy couldn't sell a painting to save his life. I mean, literally, his brother was supporting him before I think he offed himself or cut off his ear or something. But the point is that the artists lead the way. You can't expect that you're going to appreciate the fullness of their achievement while they're alive unless you've really cultivated that capacity. And you can do that, and you should do that. It's just a richer, better life, in my opinion. It's like music, painting. These things just enrich poetry. These things enrich a human life. So why not start to cultivate your learning about them early? And you can make a conscious... I know that I was very fortunate because I didn't understand Picasso. I didn't like his work. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. But I did take a college course at a very good university, and this is one of the things they did well. One of the things they did well. A lot of things they didn't do well at all, but this one they did well. And they said, well, you can either write a paper or you can explain to the class what the thing is with this Picasso character. And so I had to spend a month, 6 weeks studying everything I could get my hands on to learn about Picasso. And they have a good library at the school too. So it took a few months, but I started to get it. And then once that opened up, then it opened up a whole world, right? And that's the same thing's true with music or poetry or sculpture. It's serious stuff, but I mean, it's nourishing, but it's a lot of it's serious stuff, and you've got to take it seriously at first until you learn what the language is, and then you realize the strengths and limitations of Picasso. Not until then, and that's just the way the world is. It takes some effort to get something out, except for the beauty of nature, which I think everybody instinctively responds to, unless they've been, raised completely in a city. And that's unfortunate because they're cut off, and oftentimes that goes along with a considerable neurosis as well, right? So I forgot your question, and I think what you were saying, and many people say this, well, that's just, I think a kid could do that. The other way to learn is to try doing it. Try painting a Pollock. Just try. It's not what people think. I mean, you think that's easy. You've never tried it. Right?
No, agreed. I don't find them easy. It's
I mean, it's not easy to do.
Well, some of them I do, but like a Pollock I don't, for example. But it's just that
Well, the simple, the ones that are notorious for a reason. The Dadaists in the early 20th century. That would put up a toilet in a museum, which was a statement, right? And that statement may have needed to be said. But then you have pieces of art that are just magnificent, and they're one gesture. Picasso takes a bicycle seat, and then he takes the handles from the bicycle, and he just puts them together into a bull's head. It's a gorgeous bull's head. Have you ever seen that? But see, he's a master. He's a master, and so I'm not saying anything about Picasso's character. I'm not talking about Ezra Pound's, whether he was a good guy or not. What I'm saying is that some of the gestures of these artists, they can be simple, involve almost no effort from them. They can do it because they've cultivated themselves, right? And so suspend judgment till you know more is what I would say about art in general. And the same thing's true. Like now, some of the contemporary stuff I have a lot of problems with. But I know that I will learn and evolve, and some of it's going to be worth looking at.
Thank you. That's it for that.
Okay. Just because we know through the history of art that there were many times when great artists were dissed for being ridiculous. You know, and this is garbage. Like the Impressionists were not able to show at the gallery contests or something like that in Paris and London. They called them savages, the fauves. And now, I mean, people worship these paintings. It's a general understanding that, you know, some of these paintings are priceless. All right. Last question before we stop, or a question or two?
Yeah. One more question is about the effect that certain readings or people have on me. Like, I noticed that when I listen to Eckhart Tolle, like an Eckhart Tolle video,
Mm-hmm.
I'm instantly settled down, made like my mind is a little more clear.
Mm-hmm.
When I read some of what Don Juan says to Carlos, I get like, it's almost like a sense of adventure or fear sometimes. Like he speaks very sternly or very seriously, as opposed to Eckhart's more jovial, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So these each bring out like a different side or feeling to me, and some of that. So my question is,
good observation. Good observation. Go ahead.
My question is about that is like, how much of that is me versus how much of that is the frequency they're speaking at?
Okay, good question. Now, in the case of Don Juan, and Don Gennaro, who are the people we're really interested in, we have Carlos taking notes, translating their words into English, and then writing a book that's going to be a bestseller. So we're a long ways away from hearing Don Juan speak.
Right.
Now with Eckhart Tolle, he did everybody the great favor of reading his own books, and they are good books for people. And so they have an effect because Eckhart Tolle's got a certain amount of something special that has an effect. And you've noticed. Good. So I think it's great that you're paying enough attention to the way some books can energize you, some books can calm you down, some books can inspire you, some books can bore you to tears, some books are basically no yield and worthless, and other books are extremely important to us individually and collectively. That's great. So I think that's what I have to say about that. All right. You got to remember
Okay.
Duck Soup. Do you have that book around, Duck Soup?
Yeah, I do, but I don't know which one it is. I have the three, so.
I think it's okay. Well, if people aren't familiar with Duck Soup, they can DM me or text me or ask me or whatever, or maybe it'll come up another time. Maybe we should keep some of those more handy. All right. Does that kind of answer that? So always pay attention to what you're listening to or reading to, because, you know, if it's gone through, and this is for any subject, if it's gone through 3 different hands before it got to you, you don't know what's been cut out. You don't know what's been put in. You don't know what kind of bias has been put on the selection, right? Why was this thing selected and this not? And then they put the headline, which is going to color the way you look at it in the first place. Am I making sense? So
No, you're making sense.
Okay, good. So you got to pay attention to all those things. And then when you're more sensitive, then you can start to see how you're either being supported, nourished, or manipulated and robbed, you know, of your attention. And the thing is, like I said before, if lies get implanted into your head, You start living a lie, and that's debilitating. That's debilitating. So we got to be careful individually and collectively, but there's a limit to what can be done collectively at this stage. It looks like. So guard yourself against people of the lie. Which, by the way, is a good book by Scott Peck. People of the lie. Okay, final question?
No, that's good for now.
All right, sir. Well, nice seeing you. Take good care.